And he told us that he was on a transport to Treblinka. And he was assigned to load clothing that was taken from the victims into the trains. And he managed to hide in one of the wagons with the clothing and jump the train when they were taking it to Germany or whatever. And he came to us and he told us exactly of what happened there. And none of us believed him. We thought that he's a little off his rocker. He was telling us that people were taken there and gassed upon arrival, all regardless of age, sex, anything. This was 1942. We refused to believe him. Looking back, maybe we just didn't want to believe it. Okay? About the executing the people in Skaržisko, I also have to go back, I'm sorry. When we were still, Adam and I, when we were still doing the odds and ends, we were, not Adam, I was taken to this place there. I personally was digging the graves. It was about 20 feet long, about 6-7 feet wide, and whatever the depth. And this Ukrainian guard was there, our buddy, and he told me that the people brought there, that most of them didn't even know what is happening to them because they were so weakened, or if they came in there because of the typhus, they were delirious, that they had to go down in there, just lying down one by one in a very neat row. That's how they were shot. And they were pouring lime, it's a white substance that they use in building construction, poured over them. Okay, so I finished with Skaržisko. Okay.
They have like another minute or two if you want to use it up.
Yeah,
Continue?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I think you have to tell what happens in Buchenwald and Theresienstadt very quickly if you want to get to, you know, the trial and
Okay.
everything. Okay,
Yeah?
go ahead.
Go on.
Where were you taken from?
1944 in August, when the Soviet armies started approaching, they were already in part of eastern Poland at the time. They decided to evacuate the entire camp. On the last Sunday, before the evacuation, everybody out, we lined up, and the head of the entire camp, Dr. Rost, R-O-S-T, Dr. Rost, he was the director, the head of the entire camp, came into the living quarters part of the camp, and I wish I could show you,
Well,
and walked by
United
I knew
States.
this. I knew this was going to happen.
Could I just have
Okay.
that letter that
probably
Came the time in August to be ready to be evacuated. Dr. Rost came into the living quarters there, and he made a selection. He wanted to make sure that only able-bodied people would go to Germany to work further for their war effort. So he picked out about 200 or 250 people. In other words, he made us run where we couldn't keep up, looked us over one way or the other, and he decided who is too weak to work for the German armament effort. All these people that were selected went to the side. There were the Ukrainian guards, onto trucks, took them out again to this Strelica there to this shooting gallery. That's how they executed them. And the rest that he decided are worthy to be evacuated remained. 2 days later, loaded us up into trains. Women in the back of the train into wagons, the last few wagons, where my sister Edja and Esther were. And we proceeded into Germany. In Leipzig, the wagons with the women were detached, I should say, and we proceeded to Buchenwald. Buchenwald, we shed our clothing, went to the showers, the hair, the whole bit. We put the striped pajamas on. We were there for 1 week. After 1 week, they sent us to a sub-camp called Schlieben. We arrived there, they put us to work into a Panzerfaust factory, which was like a handheld anti-tank weapon. We stayed there till about, by December or January, I really don't remember. Adam and I were separated. They took Adam with another group of people away, and I remained in Schlieben. The conditions in Schlieben were not bad, considering, were not bad. And at one time, must have been in December because Adam was still there, we were at night, we were at the day shift. And during the night when we were sleeping, the entire factory blew up. In this factory there were also French, Italian, prisoners of war, and gypsies. And although we don't know for sure, but 90% it was a sabotage act by some underground forces because there was no planes or bombings like that. So quickly they rebuilt it because it was a very primitive kind of situation there. They put it in the woods so that it wouldn't be bombed. And we stayed there till about, not about, I know now for sure because I looked up the documents. We stayed there till April the 11th. April 11th they loaded us into trains again, and we were taken to Theresienstadt, which is south of Prague. We were in the trains, the door was open, freight trains, the door was wide open, one assessment on this side, one assessment on this side with his feet dangling out, and we traveled the 100 or 150 miles for 14 days and 14 nights because the railroad was shattered and devastated. They kept zigzagging back and forth until we made it to Theresienstadt. And in Theresienstadt at that time, more camps, evacuees, people that came into Theresienstadt from all over because the Allies were approaching from the west and the Soviets from the east. And we're getting very tight there. Started bringing us to Theresienstadt. In Theresienstadt, we were there until about, well, we were there till the end of the war, but a few days before, they painted a red cross on the roofs, on the barracks. It seems that the higher ups SS, which had orders to liquidate us, seems negotiated with the International Red Cross to save their own skin. And they did not liquidate us, and that's how we stayed until May the 8th. May the 8th, the Soviet army came in. I stayed there, trying to rush because we stayed there next to a few weeks until I recuperated, gained some strength, be able to move around. I came to Lodz to try to see who was left, and I met Edja there on the street. I stayed one night there.
you go back to your home?
I went back to the home. I stayed outside the store. Some people owned a painting, was a painting store, like selling paint. I didn't identify myself, but I did go up to the two apartments where my two sisters lived, hoping that I'll get some mementos, a picture, anything. A very cold reception, didn't even let me in. They don't have anything, slammed the door, that's it. I decided to go back to Katowice, where Edja's husband Adam already had an apartment. I stayed there 2 days, and a few friends of mine that survived the war and myself started going west. We smuggled ourselves from Poland to Czechoslovakia. From Czechoslovakia, from the Russian occupied zone, we were trying to get to the American zone, which was in Pilsen, on the border. We managed that by hiding in a luggage freight train or something. We managed to get to the American side, the military. There was a rabbi, a chaplain that was attached to the Third Army. They sprayed us with all these powders that they do, you know.
For what?
Disinfection, something. And they sent us to a DP camp in Landsberg am Lech, which is in Bavaria, outside of Munich, about 20 miles from Munich. And there were 5,000 people there waiting for immigration. Israel, Palestine at that time, or America, or Australia, or Canada, not to go back. It was a DP camp. We had nothing to do with Poland anymore, as far as I was concerned. It was a mass cemetery. There was no place for us there. And in 1945, toward the end, I met my wife there. In 46, we married.
What is her name?
My wife's name is Pearl Mermelstein from home, from Hungarian side. And 1949, and 15th of April, Roberta was born in Germany. And what else should I mention about Landsberg? I worked there for the administration and police department or whatever. And we waited to immigrate to the United States.
Why did you want to come to the U.S.?
Hmm?
Why did you choose to come to the United States?
Well, the United States was first choice. Israel was second choice. At that time, to go to Palestine was almost impossible. It was the Exodus, where they sent people back. The British intercepted thing. And with a little baby, we decided we'll go here. So the Jewish organizations here forwarded an affidavit to us, and we went to the procedure to the American consulate in Augsburg, in the town there. And in November 1949, we left for Bremen, which is one of the main ports in Germany, and on a transportation boat, an army transport boat called General Muir. We crossed the Atlantic, we arrived in Boston. From Boston, as soon as we arrived, they put us on a train to go to New York. They were waiting for us there. The good people, very well organized. Took us to a hotel on 87th Street in Manhattan called Capitol Hall. They put us up there. They provided the baby with milk. And we stayed there for about 6 weeks. They found an apartment for us.
Which organization was this? Which organization was helping you?
It's NYNA, something for the New Americans. I don't remember what the NY stands for. They were located at 15 Park Row in Manhattan. Terrific people.
Before you left Europe, did you participate in testifying in any of the war trials, in the war crimes trials?
Yes. In 1948, I was called as a witness for the prosecution to Leipzig, which was in the Soviet-occupied zone. It seemed that they arrested 24 Germans, including this director, Dr. Rost, who was responsible for the death of so many people. And after the trial, after I left to the United States, I decided to find out what happened to them. And I wrote to the embassy in Washington, and this is what the reply I received. Dear Mr. Grundman, in reference to your letter of May 5, 1989, the General Prosecutor of the German Democratic Republic informed us about the following. During the years 1948 and 1949, several trials took place before the District Court of Leipzig against former directors, head of factories, engineers, masters, foremen, and members of the factory security unit of the HASA Corporation. These trials were some of the most important criminal proceedings that took place on the territory of the German Democratic Republic. This is in particular true for the two trials against the members of branch offices of the HASA Corporation at Skarżysko-Kamienna and Częstochowa. In the so-called Kamienna trial, 24 defendants had been brought to justice. 4 had been sentenced to death, 2 to lifelong imprisonment, 18 to sentences up to 15 years imprisonment. The death sentence against the director of the HASA Factory C at Skarżysko-Kamienna, Dr. Arthur Rost, born October 1, 1905, was carried out, as well as the other sentences. The former head of the factory, Felix Krebs, born May 2, 1911, was sentenced to lifelong imprisonment. I hope this piece of information contains a full answer to your question. Sincerely.
How many members of your family survived?
I took down on paper that 71 members of my immediate family, by immediate family I mean uncles, aunts, and cousins, 71 perished. 7 survived. 3 survived in the Soviet Union. My brother that made it to the Soviet Union to the other side remained on the Soviet-occupied zone of Poland. And when the Germans came in there, he was in the town of Slonim. And to the best of the information that I got, he was shot with all the other members of the Jewish community in this town in 1941.
Now, when you came to the United States, what work did you do?
Well, I started working first in some belt factory that one of my friends took me in there for the minimum wage of 75 cents an hour. Then about 2 years later, well, I made more money then, but about 2 years later, I started working for a men's rainwear company, worked myself up to the head of the shipping department, getting into the production department. Stayed there for about 13, 14 years. Then the owner passed away and liquidated. I wound up at another company where I manufactured leather sportswear, where I was more or less in the same capacity. I had a company car and all the benefits. I had nothing to complain.
Do you think that people in the United States, how did they treat you when you came here?
In the United States?
Yes. The
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Jewish community accepted you?
The Jewish community that brought me over here, it was mostly the joint thing. Absolutely. If they collect money for these causes, we should all dig deep into the pockets to come into a strange country without a language, without anything else really, and no family. This was something that I will cherish as long as I live. I'll be forever grateful to them, what they did for us.
Do you still have dreams or nightmares about what happened?
The nightmares that I have quite often is only about one place, the Skarżysko-Kamienna. I knew that before we started that interview, you told me that we do have a limited amount of time. I was trying to squeeze in as much as I could. But I didn't tell you about the people that escaped from Skarżysko-Kamienna, that without exception, at least during my stay there, were all brought back sooner or later and publicly hanged. We all had to come out of the barracks and witness the public hanging with a big sign here, "I tried to escape." If the police didn't pick them up, the local population would pick them up because they did get a tremendous reward of 2 pounds of sugar at that time. These were times that are very difficult to describe. If I wasn't there myself, I would say that it is not possible that this could happen, and I give you my word that I tried to omit the horror stories. I didn't want to go into details of what went on in our heart. But during the entire war, I was driven by the fact that I wanted to live to see the point the Germans humbled, and then I can die with a smile on my face. I just wanted to see these arrogant people humbled. And thank God I did see it. I did see it. I saw their cities. I saw what was done. I saw this Dr. Ross sitting there on this trial. What a satisfaction it was that I bribed a detective, gave him a pack of cigarettes, and I was there in this police station in a room where they brought him down to me. And he was defiant as ever. He was mentioning the laws, the articles that prohibit to bring a prisoner down to see a witness after he is already convicted or something like that. Defiant as ever.
What did you say to him?
Well, there was nothing complimentary about it. Nothing complimentary about it. That's what people can do, a doctor, a chemist. Now, remember another thing, that this camp was not run by the SS or by the Gestapo. This was a Hasa Corporation, a German firm that did the work and the armaments for the Germans. And they starved us to death because they had an excess of people. Why feed us? If we died, they had more than they could handle. Hundreds of people would come in. At this trial, by the way, I hope I can get this in. At this trial, there was a German former soldier who witnessed in Skaržisko that after they evacuated us, they had other Jews brought in from someplace to dig up all these mass graves because they didn't want to leave a trace. And they lined them up like corkwood, is it? And burned the bodies. They were trying to cover up of what they did. And this was true, what I read later in the books of the other camps. They were trying to cover up of what they did. These were civilians. These were civilians employed by a German firm. Can you imagine?
What message would you like to leave for your grandchildren? What would you like to tell them? What did you learn? What could they learn?
I would like to say to my grandchildren that whatever I told them here, this is exactly what happened, and I hope that it will never happen again in anybody's lifetime. And I want to say this, that for 2,000 years since the dispersion, the Jewish people had to depend on the kindness of strangers. Since the creation of State of Israel, this is no longer the case. Had the Jewish state come into existence in 1938 instead of 1948, this monumental tragedy, known as the Holocaust, could have been prevented.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, rolling.
All right, this picture here shows my father and my mother in one of the spas called Ivonic, circa 1935. As you can see, my mother was fashion-minded, dressed always. This
Okay.
picture.
Okay.
Okay, this picture was taken about 1934. My sister Manya, second from the right. My sister Fela is the fifth from the right. And the rest cousins. The little girl at the extreme left, the little girl on the extreme left is Manya's daughter Rose.
Okay. Okay.
This picture was taken, I'll say 1938. I am second from the right. Next to me, the one with the hat, is my friend Rolnik, the one that we had this escapade going to the Soviet Union. And the rest are two friends. Lodge,
When?
okay? This picture was taken in the summer of 1939. I am the one with the tank top with friends.
Where was it taken? Where was it taken?
When?
Where?
Oh, this was taken in a summer resort called Vishnova Gora.
Okay.
This is my brother Icho, Isaac. He escaped to the Soviet side, to the Soviet occupied zone, but Germans still reached him there.
Okay. Okay.
This is my sister Fela and her then fiancé. Was taken in Lodz, I would say 1937.
Okay.
This is a document that I have received to prove that I was in Buchenwald, that my number was 68098, and the time that I was there. That's it.
Okay.
This is my sister Edja.